trouble. You know serving me's a no-no. Clean as a whistle as I pull out in my Rolls Royce. Yellow bone passenger, they see it, they say, oh boy. Tell Cali back it up, go. Down for armed trafficking, don't make me pull that fofo. Ask you what you laughing at, represent that mud life. Dirty money, bitch, your mud right. We come together, holding hands and holler mud life. We all strapping all black, it's like Bud Light.
All we do is win.
You riding the what?
What?
We riding the night. Now you riding with me cause you wasn't riding no right.
We, no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there. And they say yeah. And they stay there. Up, down, up, down. Cause all I do is win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air. Make them stay there.
Oh, water getting boiled. Snoopy in the hootie. System overload. I've been running this rap game since I was 20 years old. I hung with the worst of them. Bust till I burst them up. Floss them up, toss them up. Harder one, close them up. Pardon me, I'm bossing up. Brace you up, bless you, bro. Don't mess with us. We like the youth in the 80s. Back to back, set a track. Hit the link, get it back. Get the trick, jump the track back. Time and time again, Al Davis said it best. Just win, baby, win.
All I do is win, no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there. And they say yeah. And they say there. Up, down. Cause all I do is win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there.
The title of our showcase, the Provost Premiere, intends to honor the long-standing support the SDU has received from the Office of the Provost. Tonight, we express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Purvine, Senior Associate Provost, Dr. K. Renee Pfister, Associate Provost, Professor Ashley Ireland, Assistant Provost and Director for Online Programs. We also look forward to working with the incoming Provost, Dr. Paul Twigg. Welcome to Murray State. This team works tirelessly to ensure the SDU has the opportunity to travel, compete, and win on behalf of Murray State University. Please join us in thanking these individuals.
We also want to take a second to thank President Patterson for being with us here today. It's been so great seeing him get so involved with things on campus, and we're really honored to host one of those events. So thank you, and we're really looking forward to working more with you in the future. So let's give him a big hand as well. As of right now, 5 out of the 6 members of the SDU traveling to tournaments have been recruited from the Commonwealth Honors Academy, and we have 1 former scholar who plans to join us next fall as well. The Commonwealth Honors Academy is a 3-week academic enrichment experience for rising high school seniors held at every June here at Murray State University. Students live on campus while taking college-level honors classes, such as Dr. Goch's debate class, and participating in fun activities and seminars to help them grow personally and socially. Without this program, we'd just have Caleb. And while he's great, he is graduating, so we'd like to extend a special thanks to CHA. Such an event does not happen without 3 individuals: Ms. Lori Rogers, Administrative Assistant at the Honors College, Dr. Laura Sullivan-Beckers, Academic Dean, and Professor Melanie McCallan-Seib, Student Life Dean. Please take a second to thank these individuals as well. Thank you for all you do to enrich the lives of our students and the community of Murray State. We really would not have this team without your support.
If you've seen our new promotional materials, that is, our super awesome WWE posters, that is all thanks to Dr. Professor Ed Rohde and his visual communication students in his commercial photography class. Thank you for making our muscles look better than they already are, because well, we all know speech and debate isn't a real sport. And lastly, we want to thank Jeremy McKeel and the folks over in Digital Media Services for helping us broadcast this event. Now it's time to introduce our esteemed VIP judges. Our first VIP judge is Mr. Kyle Johnson. Mr. Kyle Johnson serves as the Director of Development for the Arthur J. Bauerfeind College of Business, where he leads fundraising and donor engagement efforts to support student success, academic programs, and strategic initiatives. A 2011 graduate of Murray State University, Kyle spent 8 years in the energy solutions sector prior to joining the university. Outside of his professional role, Kyle volunteers his time broadcasting local sports and produces award-winning sorghum molasses syrup. He also enjoys traveling with his wife, Kelsey, and their son, Bradley.
Our second VIP judge of the evening is Dr. Chris Trespass. Dr. Chris Trespass is an assistant professor in the Department of Biological Sciences here at Murray State University, where he offers engaging courses in introductory biology, cell biology, and immunology. He was awarded Department Teaching Awards in 2014 and 2020, the Board of Regents Teaching Excellence Award in 2017, and the ODK Outstanding Faculty Advisor of the Year Award in 2025. He guides numerous student scholars in active research in his lab, where they explore the conserved molecular mechanisms that govern fertility. Dr. Trespass also serves as the college head of Clark Residential College and chairs the Council of College Heads. In his spare time, he enjoys reading, trivia at the local pub, and crafting gourmet, handcrafted ice cream, which you will have to see me about after this gets over.
We'll see how it goes.
Our third VIP judge is Dr. Ray Horton. Dr. Ray Horton is an associate professor of English at Murray State University. He earned his PhD in English from Case Western Reserve University in 2017, and he studies 20th century and contemporary American literature. He was named Kentucky Council of Teachers of English's College Teacher of the Year in 2023, and has received the Murray State Board of Regents Teaching Excellence Award. His research focuses on depictions of religion in modern American novel, and he serves as president of the American Religion and Literature Society. When he isn't teaching, reading, and writing, he usually enjoys his time with his daughters, Emerson and Avery, playing the drums and advocating for better working and learning conditions throughout Kentucky's higher education system by serving the statewide steering committee of the United Campus Workers of Kentucky. Thank you all for your time, your expertise, your support for the Speech and Debate Union, and your commitment to the community. Without you, we would not have a winner tonight.
Our first performance tonight is an extemporaneous speech performed by Colton Boyd. An extemporaneous, or extemp, speech gives performers 30 minutes for preparation of a randomly assigned topic, and then they get 7 minutes to perform it. Typically, the topic is something to do with current events, but it can also be something lighthearted, like, is Chapel Roan this generation's Madonna? No. Please welcome Mr. Colton Boyd to the stage. Colton Boyd is a math and physics double major and a resident of White College. As a freshman on the team, this is Cole's first year competing, and already he has proven himself to be an incredible speaker and debater. Cole placed top 20 in the nation in this event, and we're really glad that he gets to show off one more time before the end of the season. Let's get this show on the road.
Space, the final frontier. For centuries, humans have dreamt of going beyond the stars and seeing what's out there. Many of us want to be the next Neil Armstrong or Lewis and Clark, but I can guarantee that none of us here want to be the next Mark Watney. In the 2015 film, The Martian, Mark Watney is an astronaut who's stuck stranded on Mars after a failed colonization attempt. Eventually, spoiler alert, he does get back home. But this was only after NASA spent over 549 days and $200 billion to get him home safely. Overall, we understand that space exploration and colonization is a big undertaking, and it's not exactly the safest thing in the world. So this brings us directly to the research question I was given for tonight. Should humans attempt to colonize Mars? While we may colonize Mars someday, as it stands right now, the answer is a resounding no. And we're going to look at this through three key details. First, we're going to look at the resources we have here available on Earth. Next, we're going to take a look at the overall feasibility of such a mission. And third, we're going to take a look at an overlooked system that we could use instead of Mars to practice our colonization efforts. So first, we're going to go ahead and fuel up for this mission and see if we even have the resources available to accomplish such a feat. Right now, I'm not even sure that the astronauts could afford to fuel up their tank to get to the launch site, but we have to understand that colonization is very expensive. NASA in 2025 reported that an estimated $500 billion to $2 trillion over the course of 20 years would have to be poured into such an undertaking. Along with this, we have a few issues we have to solve here on Earth first before we can just ditch everybody else. The United Nations in 2025 lists things such as poverty, hunger, and climate change as big motivating factors and issues we must solve on Earth first before moving on to bigger avenues. We have to understand that we can't just leave everybody else behind while everything sucks here. In order to actually go and colonize Mars, we would have to first solve all of these issues, which we're nowhere close to solving, in order to actually have any successful efforts, which is why today we should not go and colonize Mars. Next, we're going to go ahead and lift off and see if we can even get to the red planet. Now, as a budding astrophysics engineer, I'm not going to bore you with all of the details on how we would actually get there. It's a lot of science stuff, and even I don't know half of it. But today we have to understand that we don't have hyperspeed or warp drives to get us to Mars. Robert Zurin, an American aerospace engineer, suggests that even optimistic plans currently require some form of life support system that simply doesn't exist. In theory, these things work great, but in practice, we haven't actually been able to replicate the success we see in the Martian film in 2015. Along with this, we have to actually look at how a mission like this would play out. Who's running the show? And what would it look like once we get there? The Australian Space Agency reports that the Earth to Mars communication has a lag delay of around 3 to 22 minutes. Now, I know most of us here were around when Zoom was teaching in schools, and we understand that online communication often doesn't make for the best learning workplace environment. Imagine having to talk to your boss with a 22-minute delay. I think I can speak for all of us when saying that is a nightmare. Along with this, the current Outer Space Treaty doesn't actually outline how a mission like this would go. Outer space is supposed to be for everybody, but we would have to understand who is leading such a mission. Right now, it could be anybody: the Pope, President Patterson, John Cena. And we would actually have to look at who is spearheading this mission and making sure it's going smoothly. If it were to be a leader in space exploration, like SpaceX right now, we would have Elon Musk bossing everyone around, which I can speak for most of us would not be fun. So overall, we see that we currently don't have the technological capabilities to colonize Mars successfully, nor do we understand how a mission like this would play out, which is why today we should not attempt to colonize Mars. Lastly, we're going to land on a much more suitable area for us to actually attempt colonization. By trying to colonize Mars, we're trying to fly before we've even learned how to crawl. And the alternative I'm going to suggest today is the moon. Now, we've been there a few times, sure, and Artemis II recently just got back from their most recent expedition. But we understand that the moon is a much easier and safer place to actually find out if colonization even works outside of Earth. Currently, NASA suggests that the moon is much more suitable, and the Artemis missions are working towards making long-term habitation possible. Along with this, SpaceX states that the moon is a much more easy place for retrieval, communication, and spaceflight orbiting. So we understand that actually getting our astronauts there is not going to result in immediate death for those that are willing to undertake this mission. Now, while I can't say whether the moon is made out of cheese or whether or not you believe the moon landing was fake, we understand that it's much easier to go right next door to our neighbor than to go to the red planet. And understanding this is going to be what is going to allow humans to actually go to Mars in the distant future. By starting here and actually having a playground of sorts, we can cultivate our knowledge and actually understand what colonization is all about. So, going back to our question today, which was, should humans attempt to colonize Mars? The answer is no. And while I know many sci-fi nerds out there would really love to see this play out in real life, it's simply not possible and not a good idea for humans. First, we looked at the resources and how we're kind of just ditching everybody else if we really attempt to colonize Mars. Next, we looked at the feasibility, and the workplace delay combined with the space technology that we don't have is going to limit us in our ability to actually go there in the first place. And finally, we looked at a much more suitable alternative in the moon and how we can first take steps there in order to actually take one big giant leap towards Mars. Overall, I think I can speak for all of us when I say we don't want to be the next Mark Watney. And we understand that in order to further space exploration as it is today, we have to take the proper precautions in order to make sure that we can be the next Neil Armstrong, that we can progress humanity further, and that we don't get into any more arguments with our bosses over Zoom than we have to. Thank you.
It is now time to introduce tonight's competitors for our debate. Representing the affirmative tonight is Mr. Samuel Harless. Samuel Harless is an organization communication and middle school education double major. He is from Harrodsburg, Kentucky, and is the current treasurer of the Murray State Speech and Debate Team. He is a two-time national champion and is currently the top speaker in the nation for national parliamentary debate. Representing the negative for tonight is Mr. Caleb McCurran. Caleb McCurran is a senior psychology major from Paducah, Kentucky. Caleb is the current president of the Murray State Speech and Debate Team and is ranked 9th in the nation for international public debate, and is the second speaker in the nation for parliamentary debate. He will be returning in the fall as a graduate assistant to the SDU, and we are so excited to call him Coach Caleb next year. Something you should understand about debate competitions that we participate in is that these competitions are assigned the topics at random and that they do not get to choose the side that they are arguing for. The topics of debate revolve heavily around pop culture, current events, and real issues that are or are not being discussed by our legislators. In keeping with the spirit of our tournaments, the topic for tonight's debate is one that has been discussed and debated in recent political developments. The Kentucky State Legislature has proposed House Bill 766, which would change housing policies at public universities, and as such, our topic for debate tonight is, Kentucky should prohibit public universities from requiring students to live in student housing.
As the AF, Samuel must advocate for the cancellation of university housing requirements, and as the NEG, Caleb must negate the resolution and argue that universities should keep their housing requirements. Before we begin, something you should know about parliamentary procedures in our debate is that there is no clapping. We do not clap, we knock. You knock at the end of each speech to acknowledge their performance, and during the speech, you can knock to show your support if they say anything particularly interesting or riveting, which we really, really hope they do. One final thing to remember tonight is that the debate topics that we see in competition often follow highly controversial topics at the international, national, and state level. Students are assigned the topic and the side they must defend, whether it is one that they personally believe or not. Our goal with choosing a topic that has passionate people on both sides is to highlight the nuances of such a bill and spotlight some of the potential concerns and values of each position. Ultimately, the arguments brought tonight by our students may or may not reflect their values or the values of the SDU. We will now start with the affirmative's first speech.
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone for being here tonight. It's nice to see such a sizable crowd for this event. On the topic of Kentucky should prohibit public universities from requiring students to live in student housing, I do have to agree with that, and I'm going to set some framework for this round and then get into reasons why Kentucky should prohibit these housing requirements. So the first one is just some definitions, primarily over public universities, which here in Kentucky we have 8 of them. There are 8 state-funded universities spread throughout our Commonwealth. And then, of course, student housing. Student housing will be defined as university-owned residential facilities. So that includes dorms and apartment complexes. And judges, this is primarily for you. The judging criteria for today, so how you will determine who wins, is by whichever side provides the most benefits to the students. It can't be benefits to anything. It has to specifically be net benefits to students. So let me get into my case today. My first reasoning today is affordability. At Western Kentucky University, and like many others around the Commonwealth, room and board commonly exceeds $10,000 to $13,000 a year, which in a lot of those cases is more expensive than the tuition for those universities themselves. Right now, these housing requirements place an undue financial burden on all students, regardless of their situations in life. And when we look at these places, especially in a town like Bowling Green, the rental markets are usually more affordable. They provide more competitive rates than it does to live on campus. In Bowling Green, the average monthly rent ranges anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a month, which is a pretty good deal considering you get to live there for 12 months out of the year, unlike where you're stuck in student housing and have to move out every so often for a break. And when we talk about affordability, college is getting expensive every year. Prices are going up, as is everything in life. So we must realize that we need to give students the ability to choose to cut costs where they can. We need to give them the ability to make decisions that benefit their living situations. Mandated housing inflates the cost of college. If we want to see more students come through our universities, graduate, and excel in life, we need to make it to where they can actually afford to do so, which by agreeing with the affirmative you would do today. My second point is that one size doesn't fit all. Housing requirements set arbitrary rules. Typically, at least here in Kentucky, you have to be under 21 and have lived in the dorms for fewer than 4 full semesters, typically excluding summers. Those are the housing requirements. If you don't meet those, well, you're going to have to make a really good case to get out of it. And the process to getting out of it, that exemption process, is even harder to navigate because you are given a list of reasons as to why you need that exemption. And if you don't perfectly fit those cookie cutter reasons, then, well, I'm sorry, but you're out of luck. And that is unfortunately the way that the system works everywhere. And with that, we have to realize that this one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work because many students work jobs in their college town. They move there, have a job that they have to use to provide for themselves, or they come from a home life that they do not want to return to or that they cannot return to. These housing requirements do not take into account those things. But what I'm arguing for today is that we remove these requirements and we allow them to make that choice for what works best for them. And then finally, there is a student housing shortage. We see it especially with some of our largest universities, like the University of Kentucky and U of L. Both of them have faced housing shortages. Actually, in this school year, UK had a housing capacity of 102%, and then had to turn dorms that are typically doubles into triples. So while you may have signed up for a dorm just expecting one roommate, well, now you have an extra because we don't have enough space for them. And that's because of these housing requirements. If you don't meet the requirements to live off campus, then you are stuck in a dorm in a living situation that you cannot control. At U of L, they had to go and purchase an entire apartment complex and then renovate it, which took time and money away from other resources at the university. The same thing happened at Western Kentucky, where they signed a $5.4 million lease for a hotel because they don't have enough room to house their students. Housing requirements in Kentucky are arbitrary. They don't take into account a student's circumstances. They also do not wholly benefit the university, because the university has to overcome the shortage of housing. And for all of these reasons, I encourage a vote for the affirmative today.
All right, great speech. I just have a few questions. On your second point of how exemptions do exist, you mentioned they're hard to navigate. Could you expand on how those exemptions do exist?
So the exemptions have set standards. In Kentucky, all of them have for you to be able to commute from your parents' home, they have to live within a 50-mile radius, which is understandable. But then you also have medical exemptions, which require extensive documentation, sometimes going back years, if not decades, which is kind of an invasion of a student's privacy, because why should I have to turn over all of my medical records just to prove to you that I don't need to live in student housing?
Okay, and on your first point of affordability, you mentioned that this is roughly off-campus housing in WKU is roughly from $700 to $1,000 per month?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's a difference of roughly $200 to $300 per month, right?
Yes.
Okay, would that not be offset by all of the amenities that are not included in rent if you were to live off campus, like heating, electricity, water, internet, and possibly even gas or a car payment?
While this average does not include all of those things, you do also have to realize that a student's living situation that they can determine is more important than all of these amenities. You can find these amenities anywhere, but when you can determine the situation that you are living in, that is what is more beneficial to you, because you actually have control. Whereas in student housing, you are thrown into a dorm either that you did not want to live in, or you are stuck living with a person that you may not get along with, that you may be stuck in a bad situation with.
Okay, and lastly, are high GPAs beneficial for students?
They are, but high GPAs are found through academic rigor and actually having motivation to reach their goals in college. It is not solely because of housing. While housing can provide some perks, the true perks come from actually attending class, actually being engaged in what you are learning, actually being passionate to reach your degree, not just housing. And housing is not even the main reason GPAs increase.
Okay. All right, thank you guys for being here today. I am going to jump right into today's resolution. Kentucky should prohibit public universities from requiring students to live in student housing. Now, I agree with the parameters that my opponent has laid out. I'm going to jump right into showing you why that the status quo is actually preferable if we're talking about net benefits to students. Now, my opponent gives you a compelling case. I'm going to give you one that hopefully you think is a little better. First off, we have to talk about student success. As a whole, student success. Living on campus significantly, consistently leads to better student outcomes. This is because they are often closer to classes, tutoring, advising, and resources. According to Ideas 2020, students living on campus had an average GPA increase to those living off campus of 0.97. That is nearly an entire letter grade difference between students who live on campus versus off campus on average. This is the pinnacle of student success. Ultimately, we're trying to get in and get out and get the good grades and hopefully the degree. Which leads me to my next point of how, according to the National Center for Education Statistics in 2025, Students who live on campus, on average, have a 5% greater retention rate, meaning they are 5% more likely to actually complete their degree. These are averages, yes, but they're not things that can be overlooked, especially when we're looking at net benefits to students. The goal of college is to get people degrees so that they can then enter the workforce. This is absolutely the pinnacle of net benefits. The impact here is that long-term academic success will always outweigh a short-term inconvenience. Always. That is the goal of college. My second point is that of university costs. My opponent mentions that things are getting expensive. Yes. That is not unique to college or housing specifically. My opponent mentions that the cost of college is inflating, so is everything else. And so this point is, one, non-unique, but also I'm going to show you how when universities have to then make up for revenue losses, college stays the same price regardless. Universities, especially public ones, need stable budgets. They need residence halls to then be occupied. If residence halls were to be inoccupied, if the living situation is as bad as my opponent wants you to believe, then we would see a decrease in occupancy. According to WKU, housing costs there about $6,000 to $11,000 per year. And according to the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education, even a 10% decrease in WKU's occupancy would have roughly a $2,000 net loss per student per year spread across the entire university. That does not mean that it now becomes cheaper to live at a WKU, it becomes $2,000 cheaper. No, that means that they're going to find a way to get that money back somewhere else. This looks like increasing tuition or other fees or cutting programs and faculty and staff. The money has to come from somewhere. Simply saving on housing, one, doesn't save the student any money, because I point you out in my cross-examination that there's a difference of roughly $200 to $300 per month going towards all of these things like heating, electricity, water, and internet, which you don't have to worry about if you live on campus. So this net difference of about $200 to $300 is not anything whenever you have to take into account all of the things that you have to pay for when you live off campus. The impact here is that when students then have to pay the same amount for college, if there is to be a decrease in occupancy, that does not just affect students who are living off campus. This policy does not just affect students who are living off campus. That now affects everyone. If tuition increases or faculty and staff are cut and programs are cut, that influences literally everyone. And that is net harmful to the students, because then they are at a worse college than they were before. My third and final point for you today, judges, is that of student safety. Structural environments provide transition and safety. These are things like, having RAs, security, mental health resources. All of these things are very crucial and important to students' livelihoods when we're talking about students today. According to the National Library of Medicine, roughly 60 to 70% of students report adjustment-related distress. This means that moving to college is a lot of people's first taste of independence. They don't know how to deal with that. And so that leads to mental health problems. According to Insight Higher Ed, on-campus students report 32% fewer assaults and 60% less theft living on campus than if they were not. Also, resident life programs improve sleep quality and decrease depression symptoms by up to 25%, as reported by the students, due to structure alone. Humans need structure, and that is what the status quo provides us. If we were to not have the structure, students would be harmed. On-campus students also, according to Insight Higher Ed, utilize mental health resources 40% more than if they were to live off campus. This is incredibly net beneficial to students, especially when we're talking about all the harms that exist in the status quo. The impact here is that if we reduce structure, this is bad for mental health and for student safety as a whole. I want you to look back, judges, to the judging criteria today. We are talking about students. I show you that the long-term academic success is far more important than any sort of short-term, possibly 2-year commitment.
Are students allowed to live off campus after a certain age or number of semesters?
Yes.
So then do those students not succeed in college because they're living off campus?
There are outliers, but we're looking at averages in those studies, and they're very reputable.
But don't the majority of upperclassmen and graduate students live off campus at their universities?
I think it depends. I do.
So are you failing in college because you live off campus?
No, not yet.
So then, doesn't that make your argument that student success is found in housing irrelevant?
No, I'm talking about averages. Maybe I'm an outlier.
Okay. So if a policy imposes a $10,000 or more cost on every student, is that a significant burden to some?
So that cost, again, in my case, I lay out, they're going to live somewhere. Unless you're living with your parents, you are paying rent. And sometimes then you're paying rent. And so, no, it's not. It's a matter of then where does the money go? It's going to go somewhere.
But isn't it easier for someone to pay for their housing in an installment instead of one lump sum of thousands of dollars?
Not necessarily, because I can take out student loans to pay for my housing. It's easier to get a student loan than it is to get a personal loan. So then it depends on what your credit score is.
But doesn't a student loan hurt your long-term success in life?
There's a lot of nuance there. Can.
Is debt good?
No.
Then isn't that a harm to your long-term success?
So the debt, again, we're talking about where is the money going to go. Like if I don't pay the school for my housing, I'm then going to pay someone else for my rent. You know, it's not an argument of.
But can't you find someone who can't you find housing that is cheaper and more fits to your situation?
That is a possibility. We're talking about averages.
So I was just going to talk forever, y'all. All right. Once again, thank y'all for being here, but let me jump into some rebuttal. I'm just going to go through my opponent's case point by point and take some things down that he said. So on his first point of student success, in Kentucky, upperclassmen and graduate students overwhelmingly live off campus and still remain in school and graduate. While my opponent will have you believe that we are just talking about averages, when we're talking about net benefits to students, we must look at everything. Averages are not a good show of students as a whole, especially in the matter of housing. Averages are great for some things, not in this debate. Student success is driven by academic rigor, institutional support systems, and student motivation. We're not saying that, well, these students live off campus so they don't have access to our libraries, our tutoring systems, our support systems as a whole. What we're saying is that they are getting to set the situations that they live in, that they are going to choose where they can save money, that they can choose what they want to live in. And many students will still choose to live in these dorms because they believe that is what is best for them. And for many of them, that is true. But for many others, living in student housing is not what is best for them because they can't control their situations. And then on my opponent's second point, we have to realize that university budgets fluctuate every year. Stable budgets, unfortunately, don't truly exist in the higher education world, especially for us publicly funded universities. We rely on the state to give us our budget, and that changes every year. As we saw this year, Murray State almost lost $9 million because the state legislature had to cut costs somewhere. Thankfully, our wonderful administration prevented that from happening, but it was a real threat. And the fluctuating budgets are dependent on enrollment. So there's no such thing as a stable budget in this. And tuition, that will increase no matter what. The University of Kentucky increased their tuition while leaving housing rates the same, and they have a housing requirement in place. So really, tuition increases will happen no matter what, and my opponent hasn't proven to you that this will actually make them worse. A university will increase tuition to make more money. And then on that final point of safety, we have to look at places like UK. In 2023, according to UK's own Cleary report, there were 655 safety incidents inside their residence halls. 77 of those were criminal offenses, 43 cases of sexual assault, 16 16 cases of aggravated assault, and 18 cases of burglary. Dorms are not inherently safer, and unfortunately, RAs cannot prevent that. They are students just like us. They are working their tails off to be able to afford college, and they can't handle everything. And while dorms provide some benefits for safety, you can find those by choosing where you live. Not everywhere is unsafe. Not everywhere is going to be a bad living situation. My opponent's case will equate everything into a finite position that will harm students overall, not actually bring any benefits.
All right, I got 3 minutes of rebuttal up here for you. I'm just going to jump right in. First off, my opponent wants to start off by talking about how averages don't cater to everyone. That's true. Averages are averages, and they are enough to look at when we're talking about net benefits to students. We're talking about the whole. We cannot have policies then cater to a very small minority of outliers, because then, like I show you in my second point of university costs, that affects everybody. If you were to agree with the affirmative here, then that would affect everybody. And if it is as bad as the affirmative has laid out for you today, you would then see a decrease in occupancy rates. This then leads to universities needing to recoup their costs. This brings me to my opponent's second rebuttal of fluctuating budgets. Yes, nothing is guaranteed. I'm very lucky that I have a job next year. But what we see is that universities have to recoup costs somewhere. My opponent mentions tuition's going to increase regardless. Everything's getting more expensive regardless. Guys, this is not a debate on whether or not colleges are evil and want your money. Everything is getting more expensive, and we are here for a purpose. The purpose is to get in and get out, and maybe you have some fun along the way. But when we're talking about, again, net benefits to students, fluctuating budgets is going to happen regardless. I agree with my opponent. That does not mean that tuition will not increase more or programs won't be cut more if so much money is tied to housing and suddenly less people are involved in housing. That's just a simple matter of fact. The money has to go somewhere. It's going to go up somewhere else if it goes down in housing. My opponent then mentions safety incidents and how campuses are not necessarily safe. They give a stat for the UK. I want to point out that this is non-unique and that crime happens everywhere. When we're talking about these statistics from UK and we're talking about those crime statistics, ask yourself how many more crimes were committed off campus around the campus. Probably significantly more. We don't have a stat for that today, but being on campus is significantly, on average, which is a very good way of measuring things, on average, more net beneficial to students' mental health and safety. So, judges, again, affordability, things are getting more expensive. My opponent says that students should have the choice. I give you the alternative, which is the idea that we see that long-term academic success outweighs short-term inconvenience. My opponent's only rebuttal to my statistics on how GPA increases almost a whole letter grade and how retention rates are higher are that, well, that's because those students are committed. But that's not what the averages tell you. The averages show you that that is because they live on campus. That is a correlation that cannot be ignored. And when we're talking about net benefits, I urge a vote today for the negation.
All right, so now what we're going to move into is grand cross-examination, where each opponent will take turns asking each other their cross-examination questions.
I'll let you start, actually.
Me start?
Yeah.
How are you?
Alive.
On your rebuttal, the general rebuttal of affordability and how essentially you're arguing that the short-term inconvenience is more important than the long-term success. Could you expand on that when it comes to affordability?
So with affordability, we have to realize that long-term success, like my opponent talks about, comes in a lot of different ways. And when we're in college, we are here to form us both as students and as adults. And we can create long-term success by giving students the ability to make their own decisions. Plus also affordability means that they now are in control of their financial decisions. If a student finds a housing opportunity that is more affordable and that better suits their situation and it works for them, we should allow them to live there. The current policies are policing students' ability to choose, which is not what we want to create in our society. We want to create autonomous beings who can make well thought out decisions before them. And affordability can come in many different ways. Long-term wise, affordability comes from your success, your ability to live, but also short-term. The short-term gain will mean that a student can be propelled better in the future because, hey, I've been able to save money here, or I can save money in this way and then put it towards other living expenses that I have. We are here to create students that actually know how to live in the world, that know how to manage their own lives. That is where affordability comes in. So are there universal benefits to living in a dorm?
Define universal.
Like ones that are net beneficial to all students?
Yeah, you're closer to resources, like I said, classes, tutoring, advising, mental health resources, as stated by Insight Higher Ed. 40% are more likely to utilize those resources than if they were to live off campus. Now on the point of safety. Do you happen to have a stat for the safety incidents at UK that happened off campus?
I do not, but your whole point is about the dorms being safer, and the fact that 655 safety incidents occurred in 19 residence halls is alarming. That is, and with how big UK is, that's a pretty sizable number. That is 18.87 incidents per each 1,000 students. You can't ignore a number of that size that happens in residence halls, which you have made the claim are meant to be safe. So can't students still access all of these resources to be successful despite living off campus? Like, don't they still have to come to campus for class?
Yes, they can utilize those resources. I'm showing you here, though, that they're more likely to, should they live on campus, because they're closer. It's a proximity thing. And because of that, we see that they're more likely to utilize it. On my next question here of student success, what is the point of college, ultimately? What is their goal?
College is to bring students an education, but also to form us all as adults to prepare us for working in the real world. And like I've stated time and time again, giving students the ability to choose will make them better adults, but also in their education, if we aren't letting them create the best situation that will make them perform well in school, we are failing at our job as a university. Don't students have to make a conscious decision to seek out resources to support them?
What do you, define a conscious decision?
Don't you have to actively seek out those resources to utilize them?
Yes, I'm saying that they are more visible and apparent to you should you live on campus. I have no further questions.
I do have one more. But don't students who, attend classes still have the visibility of those, know they exist? Aren't they pushed out in university bulletins constantly or brought up by your academic advisor?
Yeah, but if I live in a dorm, there's a bulletin on every door I pass. So that's what we're talking about, averages.
I have no questions for him.
All right, so if neither opponent have any other questions, then now we'll move on to asking each of our judges if they have any questions for the debaters. So we'll start with Mr. Kyle Johnson. Do you have any questions for our debaters tonight?
Knowing that enrollment is critical to the lifeblood of a university, do you have any statistics either way that helps prove your argument?
I do have a general stat, not necessarily on enrollment, but on retention rates, which is keeping people here. And according to the National Center of Education Statistics in 2025, students are 5% more likely to not drop out should they live on campus.
I do not have a statistic regarding enrollment.
Okay, we'll move on. Dr. Chris Trespass, do you have any questions for our debaters tonight?
Yes, primarily for the affirmative. I believe you brought up specific raw data on the number of safety incidents within UK.
Yes.
Do you have any data on how that compares to a town of a similar size, a city of a similar size. So instead of just raw data, percentages of sexual assaults, robberies, and those types of things compared to the larger population.
While I don't have them regarding the larger populations, the point I'm trying to make there is that if my opponent would like to stand up here and talk about dorm safety, then he must also realize that these hundreds of incidents occur in the dorm, and while there is always crime in cities, even ones as small as Murray, we must have to realize that we are discussing the student housing themselves, and while there is always a risk for crime when you are away at college, a student, by giving them the choice, they can choose, like, hey, maybe I can only afford to live in this area and I know the risk, but also they can look into the living situation that they'll be going into and they can make that decision for themselves, because we're not taking away their choice of student housing. It will always exist. We are just giving them the ability to make a conscious decision that is best for them.
All right. And finally, Dr. Ray Horton, do you have any questions for our debaters tonight?
Yeah, I do. This is for... Yes, I do. This is for both of you, but it's based on something that Sam said at the very beginning of his opening speech in terms of definitions of a public university being a university that is state-funded. And one of the big picture context for a lot of this is that the state of Kentucky is one of the only states left in the country that has not yet brought brought state appropriations back to the level inflation adjusted that they were pre-2008 recession. Public universities rely more on tuition revenue, other revenue than state revenue, state appropriations. And so another term for that is privatization, essentially, as public funds dry up, private revenue streams become necessary. So if the state were to prohibit these housing policies, my first question would be, wouldn't that accelerate the process of privatization at public universities? And the follow-up to that is, what's the long-term consequence on students who chose to go to a public university of that privatization?
Well, unfortunately, in our society, privatization is becoming it's increasing. We've seen it through many of the public journalism, things like that. But when it comes to colleges, especially the ones here in Kentucky, well, without the state government, they kind of lose their charter. So while they will kind of turn towards privatization in some areas, public universities, especially R8 here in Kentucky, wouldn't exist without the General Assembly, and they wouldn't have their administration without the government. And while looking ahead in the future, there may be a shift towards more semblances of privatization, like we saw with Western's new contract with a housing company that gives them full authority of their dorms. There is still always going to be the fact that these are public universities first, because the state government gives them a set of budget, unlike true private universities, which are solely left to their own devices, many of which are religious and rely on money from their organizations.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that also, if we go down that route of privatization, that will lead to then, yes, the universities trying to get money from other places. That not necessarily makes them beholden to those places who give them money, but it does not bode well for an objective purpose of educating, because then there are strings attached to money always. And so not only will that probably lead to higher increases of what college costs, because if universities are hurting for money and they're going towards private routes and not public routes, then they might have less money consistently. And so if they have less money, they will increase their money somewhere or cut their programs. Either way, that is not beneficial to students. And what we're getting at here is that only really happens should the universities see a dip in performance or a dip in enrollment. That is what I'm pointing out here as the negation, is that if the current status quo is so bad as to drive students away from college, my opponent is then arguing for a plan that speeds up that privatization process, because colleges will then be trying to get students in other ways.
All right. So now what we'll do is we'll have a chance for the audience to ask questions. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand and we will bring you a microphone. We don't bite, we promise. Coal might. but the rest of us don't. All right. Well, if we don't have any audience questions, then we'll move into the final speeches of tonight, with the negation giving us the reasons for why you should vote for them. And with that, we'll get started with the next speech.
Thank you guys for being here. Once again, this is my last speech, so I'm going to go into the voters. These are the three main reasons why I believe you should vote today for me, the negation. So first off, I'm going to point out that the first voter is that of revenue shortfalls. We talked about this. This came up in a very great line of questioning. We see here that universities need money. That doesn't make them evil. It just makes them a business that has to, function. And so because everything is getting expensive, my opponent's claims on how, well, college is getting more expensive, non-unique. Everything is getting more expensive. Do not flow that today, judges. When we're talking about revenue shortfalls, we're talking about how revenue has to come from somewhere. The idea that we could save students money by allowing them to live off campus, I show you on average, that is simply not something that happens. Just because they have a choice of where they can live does not mean that they will save money. I show you that in my first point of student success. Also, because this money is not necessarily being saved by the students, but it is, if they live off campus, not going to universities, then what we see is universities are raking in less money. If universities are raking in less money, that could lead them towards, privatization sooner. It could also, much more quickly, lead to budget cuts, like cuts in programs, faculty, staff, or possibly the increase of tuition or other fees. This is because the universities have to maintain their costs. If you agree with my opponent that ultimately this is not a good fit for students and that they should have the ability to choose, and it's as bad as my opponent says it is, then we will see a decrease in occupancy, which will then lead to that increase in revenue other places. My second voter for you today, judges, is that of mental health. This goes nearly uncontested. My opponent just brings up just how crime also happens in dorms. I show you, though, that it happens more so elsewhere. Also, if I'm living in a dorm, I have frequent dorm meetings and resident life programs that enable me to have those resources more apparent to me, which is why we see a much higher utilization of mental health resources if people live on campus. My third and final voter for you today, judges, is that of a two-world analysis. It's something in debate where we compare sort of the two sides and what it actually looks like if it becomes reality. In the affirmative world, we get rid of the current status quo, this policy, and we see that now universities have to recoup their costs somewhere. That means students pay the same amount in different ways, or the universities cut their programs. This is not net beneficial to students. In the status quo world, the world I am arguing for, we see that there are greater student success outcomes, greater utilization of mental health resources, and overall greater safety. And for these reasons, I urge a vote today for the negation.
All right, y'all, one last thanks for being here, but let me jump into my voters today. So I just have 3 of them for you, and that first one is our judging criteria, benefits to students. The choice of living situation is more beneficial than forcing a student into a situation that does not work for them. We are here at a university to not only further our education, but to become adults, to become the next leaders of these worlds, to learn how to make decisions for ourselves. And we can start by giving them the choice of their housing situation. My opponent talks a lot about how, well, these will benefit the university's resources, the budgets, all of it. But yeah, that may be so, but universities will always increase prices, and that doesn't benefit students. Judges, if you vote for the affirmative today, you will be allowing students to make a choice that will propel them for the future, because they will learn how to make big financial decisions for themselves, big decisions about their living situations, and many other things. But also, my opponent goes on and on a lot about how, well, affordability, there are sections of it that are non-unique simply because life is getting more expensive. Yes, life is getting more expensive, but that's not what my argument is saying. I'm saying that there are still more affordable options out there, all amenities included, than being forced into student housing. And then my second voter today is reality. The removal of the requirement does not do away with student housing. Actually, a lot of students will still choose to live in these dorms. It will just shift how universities view student housing. If there is a decrease in the number of people that live in these provided housing accommodations, then that will mean the university can begin either updating buildings or removing them if they are outdated. It will allow the university to make cuts in areas that will not greatly affect the faculty or the resources of the university. Because if you have less students living in the dorm, you can begin making predictions for the future, and you can then begin cutting the cost. You can cut cost of upkeep because, hey, well, this dorm is like 60 years old. I think it's time it goes because we have less students on campus. We have students making a choice that works for them. Also, the reality is that we are alleviating a burden on schools because, as I pointed out with Western Kentucky University, they had to spend $5.4 million for a lease for a hotel because, well, they don't have enough room. Or at UK, they have had to shove students into triple rooms that were built to be doubles. We are actually going to be alleviating a burden on the schools because they don't have to scramble at the last minute to find emergency housing accommodations for all of these students. And while, yes, many will point to that to many issues, it is important that we admit students to our universities for the betterment of ourselves and for everything else. And then finally, it is the neg case. The neg case is a university priority. It is not truly beneficial to students. And on mental health resources, I could pull my phone out right now and have immediate access to mental health resources. There's always something out there that students can access to help them in life, but by voting for the affirmative, we're providing benefits to students both in their current decisions, in the living situations that they're in, and to help propel them for their future. Thank you.
All right, speeches are done. Now it's time to vote. So here in a second, we're going to pull down a screen that will have a QR code on it for an audience vote. But as well as this, judges, if you will circle the name of who you think the winner is, we'll have somebody gather that up, and then we'll have a judge's vote and an audience vote. So with that. Also, while this is coming down, I do want to welcome up the director of the SDU, Dr. Ryan Goke.
Well, hello, everybody. So last showcase in the spring, I debated our national champions with another coach, and we won. And then, like Chuck Norris, I took my belt and I went home, and I did not do it again this year. It has been my privilege to coach these students. I have a few thank yous that I would like to say tonight for everyone for coming out here. So my dear friend and colleague at Texas Christian University uses the term forensics widow to illustrate the amount of time that our spouses spend on their own while we coach and travel. We spend late nights practicing. I work with them 3 times a week. I'm home late. We're gone, sometimes for 5 days at a time. And so I would first and foremost like to give a huge thank you to my wife, Dr. Miranda Goke, because she puts up with that and lets me do what I love. And also, she gets roped into all of our campus events. She's here for support when we are hosting our campus events for college tournaments or for high school tournaments, middle school tournaments. She gets roped into that. I've had a phenomenal team that I've been blessed to work with here, Dr. Lours and the rest of the organizational communication and leadership department. As well as President Patterson. Thank you all for taking your time to come here. Dean Keller, I see you here again. Thank you for being a champion of the students, the faculty of the College of Business. Dr. Foltz, I think you are my student's favorite hire from Murray State University because you were the one who said that we must go to Brahms when we went to the tournament at Missouri State. And my students are very picky. They complain if we go to the same restaurant from one tournament to the next and it's a month apart. And they begged me to take them 2 nights in a row to that place. Lastly, to my assistant director, Anna Moyers, and my esteemed alumnus, Josh Sanders, they were not here tonight, but they are watching online, and they have put in countless hours at every practice with me and worked with all of our tournaments. You do not get people this polished with just me. 6 to 1 is not a good ratio. They volunteered their time to help us a lot. To our esteemed judges, thank you all for coming. I hope that they've made it a very difficult decision for you. And thank you for your time and your expertise. All right, my last 2 thank yous. To my team. This has been the most successful team this year that I have had the privilege of coaching. Forensics speech and debate, by nature, is heavily individualistic. It's one-on-one debate. You are debating other schools. You're doing extemporaneous speech by yourself. The unique thing that this team this year has done is they have made it a collectivistic team sport. And that is because they rally together to prep each other. And they make sure that they hold themselves accountable. I do still go to practice, and I still coach them, but I don't have to drag them there. They hold themselves accountable. They've also been involved deeply in the community. You saw some of these photos here, but a lot of that spotlighted the hardware. Just on Tuesday, they were invited out to the McKinsey, Tennessee, on Bethel's campus to speak at the Rotary Club there as kind of a little exhibition, because they had a team back in the day and they do not now. And so they wanted to say, here's what we could do, and they asked our students to come and do that. They were also invited to go out to the Kentucky State Capitol and do an exhibition debate for our legislators. You saw some of them on that video as well. And then they also make sure that our other teams have a great time when they come here to our tournament. We just hosted the largest college tournament that we've hosted in our history. And they were not only competing and winning at that tournament, they were also making sure that everybody else had a great time. And I had 5 schools who had never been here before who came up to me afterwards and said, your students, your campus made this such a great place. We're coming back again next year. And they're actually fighting their own state tournaments. Do not put our tournament on their date because we're going to that tournament. So, can you join me in a round of applause for my team? I have to grab something here. I have one specific person on my team that I need to recognize. Caleb, come up here. Caleb is a senior, so in the spring, it is kind of our senior salute. Caleb has been our team president for 2 years now, and we've had a speech and debate team for years and years and years, long before my time. And this is my 4th year coaching a team, but these last 2 years with Caleb at the helm as team president has really transformed the way the team has run. And that was why he thinks it was his idea, but I did coerce him to come back as a grad assistant in the fall, and I got him to change his master's major to organizational communication. So from the team, we have a little memento and then a little cord for you to wear at graduation. So we're very proud of you, and we look forward to working with you. I think I'd be a lot more torn up if he was leaving, but he's not. So with that, I am going to turn it over for our verdict to our MCs.
You can do the first. Okay.
So the judges today have made a decision, and the winner of today's debate is the negation.
And then our audience vote today, it was a real close split, but you guys followed the judges' pathway and also voted for the negation. All right, so, okay. That wraps up our events for tonight. I do want to thank you all once again for coming out and watching an awesome showcase. We had a really good time performing it for you tonight. Just a reminder real quick that if you are here for extra credit, you can come down here. We are going to ask the president, the members of the provost's office, and the dean to come down to the front for a photo. But after that photo is taken, we can sign you in for your professors and your classes to get you some extra credit. But if you're not any of the people that I just named, we hope you have a really good night, and we thank you once again for coming out. It was a pleasure to host y'all.
We could shake hands.
I'm gonna hug you. Let's go hug you.
Oh, that's so sweet.